Also, welcome everyone at our Dev2Dev session about RAP, the RESTful application programming model. My name is Michael Porter. I'm a specialist in ABAP developments and integrations. Next to me is my colleague Stijn, a specialist in full stack developments. So perhaps you have already seen our previous Dev2Dev sessions, but just to recap, everybody's muted except us. The session will be recorded, so you can watch it later again. Of course, you can chat with us. The chat is being moderated. And you can ask questions, and we will try to answer these questions at the end of the session. So what is this session about? Well, we will talk about RAP, what's on the agenda. First of all, what is RAP? Then we will show you some live demos about RAP, and we will do some behaviors on that. Then there's a wrap-up, and then there is a Q&A. So, first topic, what is RAP? Now, to answer that, perhaps first we will answer why should you actually use RAP? In this session, you will see that we are going to use already proven and known modern technologies and concepts. So we will use, for example, CDS views. Most of us will already know that. We will use business logic in ABAP. We will use the OData protocol. You will know that if you have already worked with SAP Gateway. We will work with business objects. If you have experience in BOPF, it will be known for you, okay, what is a business object and so on. Next to that, SAP really emphasizes that it's a long-term strategic solution for ABAP developments, and not only on S/4HANA on-premise, but also S/4HANA in the cloud and the ABAP environment on SAP BTP. And perhaps most importantly, and for me as a backend developer, well, I'm now able via RAP to create cloud-ready enterprise applications with CRUD operations, with custom actions, with draft, and much more. So let me explain to you what is RAP. Here you can see a high-level overview of RAP. I've highlighted the most important parts for you, but basically it are three big parts. At the bottom you have your data model and your behaviors. Those combined form your business object. On top of that, you have your business service provisioning, where you will provision part of your business object to the application. How do you do that? You have to create projections. You will have to create a projection on your root CDS view, and you will have to create a projection on your behavior. And what is a projection? Well, it's kind of a role-based subset of your business object. So you will project part of maybe a whole business object to your application. Then you have your service definition. In your service definition, you will define your scope of your application. So there you will have to define, okay, which projections am I going to expose in my RAP application. Then you have your service binding. On top of that, there you will decide, okay, which protocol am I going to use to communicate with the front end. You can use, for example, OData version 2, you can use OData version 4, and there are also other protocols. And then you have your RAP application, and now you want to consume that. Well, you can consume that as a web API, or you can use it for a SAP Fiori UI, or there are also other possibilities. Now, we also talk about business objects in the context of RAP, but what do they mean with that? A business object, basically it has three things. It has a structure. It is your data model, so your CDS data model with the root CDS, and maybe that has childs, maybe those childs have other childs. The whole composition tree, that's your data model, that is the structure of your business object. Your business object also has a behavior, and your behavior will tell you, okay, what can I do with my business object? Well, in your behavior, you will have to define your CRUD operations, custom actions, locking, authorizations, drafting, and so on. And then also each business object also has its own runtime implementation. And that runtime implementation, it exists in two parts. You have your interaction phase, and you have your save sequence. And in between, you have your transactional buffer. And your transactional buffer, you can think of it as a memory area. And whenever you do a modifier, for example, or a lock, then your instance data of your business object will be set in your transactional buffer. And it's only when you save your save sequence, then that data will be saved in your database. And maybe also important in RAP, you have three main scenarios. You have your managed scenario, you have your unmanaged scenario, and you have a managed scenario with an unmanaged save. What do they mean with that? So managed scenario, in a managed scenario, that's also what we will demo for you today. In a managed scenario, most things will be taken care of by the RAP framework. For example, your CRUD operations, locking, authorization checks, and so on. These will be taken care of out of the box by the RAP framework. I do not have to code that. Of course, there are places where I can add my own custom code. For example, when I will show you a determination or a validation, those things you have to code the business logic yourself. But all the other parts are managed by the RAP framework. In an unmanaged framework, an unmanaged scenario, it's actually completely other way around. In an unmanaged scenario, most things you will have to code yourself. For example, your CRUD operations, the save sequence, blocking, you'll all have to do that yourself. Of course, there are places in the RAP framework that will be available for you. For example, that transactional buffer, that implementation phase in your save sequence, this will be available, but you will have to code the CRUD and so on yourself. And then the last one is basically your managed scenario with an unmanaged save. So for example, let's say you want to have your CRUD operations working out of the box, but while saving your data, maybe you want to add a bit of your own custom code, well, then you can use the managed scenario with an unmanaged save. Now, the next demo, Stijn will show you.
Thank you, Michael. So yeah, you may be wondering why all the pictures of football. Well, we were looking for a good example to create a demo to showcase all the RAP capabilities. So later this year, it's the FIFA World Cup, so why not do something with that? So we're going to create a tournament app. I will show you the result of our demo first in the browser. And so we will create a Fiori Elements app with on the master page a list of all the tournaments, and when you select the tournament, you come to a detail page with information of the tournament, and we will get a list of matches that are played for that tournament. So yeah, you see there are no delete or create or update buttons. That's because this is just the display only version that we already created, and then later in a live demo we will add some extra functionality like the CRUD operations and things like that. But first I will explain how we created this. So first we created, of course, the database tables to store all the information. And we have three tables: tournament table with all the info of the tournament. Tournament will have a link to the matches. It can be multiple matches in a tournament. And then a match has a home team and an away team, so we'll have a separate table where we store things like the name of a team. Then I will go to Eclipse, because like Michael already mentioned, everything is done in Eclipse. So you have to create CDSs, your data binding, all things you can do only in Eclipse. So after, when we have the tables, and we need, on top of that, we need to create a virtual data model. And we do this by first creating some basic CDSs. So for example, the tournament basic CDS, basic view, it's just a one-on-one representation of our tables. So we will have three views. We have the tournament, the team, and the match. It just selects all the fields from that table. And you also see there are some extra tags between the fields that I will come back to you later. Also important to know for the RAP framework, we need to use the new types of CDS, so the view entity type CDSs. So we will use them here also. Once we have our basic views, we can combine them and create composite views. So that's just a combination of different basic views. So in the end, we will end up with two entities. We will end up with a tournament overview for the list of tournaments, and then we have matches. And A tournament, you can see, is just a select on the basic tournament view. It just selects all the fields. And a match overview CDS is a selection of the fields of the match basic view, but also we have two associations to the team's basic view to select the home team name and the away team name. What you also here see in the tournament view is the define route. So with the composite views, we can create a sort of hierarchy. So we have the parent or the root entity, which is tournament, and this tournament has matches, so that's the child entity. So we will have in the root view, we will have a composition, so a sort of link to the match. And in a match, we have an association to parent to link back to the tournament. RAP needs this to work. Now that we have all the information that we need from the database, we can add another layer on top of this, and this is the projection. These are the projection views. So in a projection view, you can decide which field should be exposed to the OData service, and you can have multiple projection views for the same entity. For different use cases, you can select other fields. So we will have one for tournament and one for match. And you can see it's just as projection on the composite view. And there's also a link to the match composite view. And for a match is the other way around. You have a link back to the parent. So this way we have the hierarchy, you have the tournament, and the child is the match. You also see here is a provider contract. That's something mandatory. Contract here is just a set of rules that a CDS will follow. So this will do some syntax checks, things like that. So now we have our virtual data model. We collected all the information from the tables. Now we need to create our data service. To do this, we first create a definition. So it's just a list of all the views you want to expose or all the entities you want to expose to the front end. And then from that definition, you can create a binding. And in a binding, you say which OData protocol you need to use. And then when that's activated, you can publish it. And when you publish it, you can use the preview button to see a preview of your app. Of course, later when you want to deploy this app, you need to create a real app with a wizard in Bus or something. But for now, we can just use the preview button. So now our display-only version of the app is ready, and we did this by creating first the virtual data model, then the data service. What I forgot to mention, of course, we now will preview it. We will have just an empty screen because you didn't say which field should be where on the page. So for that, we also need some metadata text. And you saw already some in the CDSs, but it's better to place them in a separate file. So for that, we created two metadata extension files, one for the tournament and one for the match. So if you open one, you see a lot of metadata. For example, the line item with this metadata tag, you can say which field should be in which column. So we have a line item with possession 10. That means that in our preview, we will see that these fields are added as columns. Voilà. Now Michael will show you some extra functionality.
Thank you, Stijn. So what am I going to show you? So we'll create behavior because so far we have a read-only RAP application. So I do want to create CRUD operations, create, update, delete, and I will also show you how how to create a determination. And you will see I have a certain field on my tournament. It's called tournament number, and I want that the RAP framework will determine for me the value at runtime. Let me go to Eclipse. So thank you. Yes. So how do we do this? Well, for behavior, we need to create a behavior on our root CDS view. Yeah. So for us, it's the tournament role view. Just going to make sure that everything is activated. Okay. So right-click, new behavior definition. Here I have to decide, okay, which type of scenario do I want to use? Well, we do want to use a managed scenario. I click managed here, next, and finish. So now we have our behavior. I will quickly copy paste some code so I don't have to type it myself. Copy paste. Remove this. And there we go. I'm going to activate it. So let me explain what is in the behavior. First keyword you see at the top is managed. We are using the managed behavior. Then you see already implementation in class and a class name. This class, this ABAP class, will be used to add your own ABAP logic if you want, for example, if you are going to create a custom action or a validation or a determination. Then we have the keyword strict. Strict, what does it do? Well, it will enforce a syntax check on our behavior, and that will make sure that our behavior is upgrade proof for future RAP releases. Then we have our entities. So we have an entity for tournament. We have an entity for match. So what's in that entity, the tournament entity? First of all, we have a persistent table. In a managed scenario, you have to have a certain database table where you can save your data in. Then we have lock, authorization, and ETAG. Those things are managed by the RAP framework in a managed scenario. So I'm not going to explain them completely. Just keep in mind that in an unmanaged scenario, you have to create your own ABAP logic to have locking and ETAG and authorization masters and so on. Then we have a mapping. For example, if your root CDS view has different fields or different field names than your database table, well, then you need a mapping. Then we have some field features. First one is for tournament UID. In a managed scenario, each database table has to have a primary key, and that has to be some kind of UID that the RAP framework can use to fill up. So I'm going to tell the RAP framework, okay, make this field read-only, and the numbering of that is managed by you. Then we have our tournament number. I also make that read-only. Why? Because you will see the next keyword, the next line, I'm going to make a determination for that. So I will let the RAP framework determine the value of that. But I do not want that the user can change that or can fill it in. So here we have a determination. It's called create key. So when does it trigger? Well, on a modify. Which modify specifically? On a create. Keep in mind that you also can add fields here. So, for example, you could have this determination trigger on a certain field when that value of that field changes. I will show you the code, of course, for that determination in a minute. Then you have our CRUD operations, create, update, delete. I just have to add them here. I don't have to do anything else, so they will work out of the box. And then we have our association to our matches. And I'll also add here the create. So what does this do? This will enforce that I can only create a match when I have a tournament because they need to be linked together. Now for the match entity, it's pretty much the same. So we also have a persistent table, also have a mapping, and also you have your CRUD operations. But do notice the create is not here. The create is in your tournament entity because we want to enforce that you can only create a match when you have a tournament. So let me activate this. Now I have to implement my class. Best way to do that is to use Eclipse quick fixes. So we can let Eclipse create the class for me. Next, finish. So here you will see my determination was called create key. Here I have to add my own business logic. So let me copy paste that. this. Now you will see this is not pure ABAP, but it's actually EML, so the entity manipulation language. Yeah, it's a subset of the ABAP language. So I'm not. There's a lot of documentation on SAP and SAP help for that to explain you what it does. Let me quickly tell you what it does here. First of all, we will read our business object tournaments, specifically the entity tournament. We will read field's tournament number and based on certain keys, and then we have a result data of table tournaments. Then we will delete all the tournaments which already have a tournament key in this internal table, of course. Then we have a bit of coding where we will call another custom ABAP class, and that class will tell us, okay, what's the next available number of tournament numbers? Okay, and then we tell the RAP framework, please update our entity and add that tournament number to the tournament that we are just creating. So that's basically what is happening here in EML. I'm also going to activate this. So now we have our behavior, we have implementation class, but I still need to project my behavior to my application. How do I do that? I go to my CDS projections, I do right-click, new behavior. You will notice that Eclipse knows, okay, it's a CDS projection, so I'll have to add a behavior projection. It's already filled in. Next, finish. And this is my projection. And if I want to project everything from my behavior to my application, then I just have to activate and do not activate it. And then we will test it. So we go to our service binding, do a preview. Yeah, this preview doesn't always work. So what I'm going to do quickly is remove my service binding and recreate it. Sometimes it happens in Eclipse. So new service binding. I'm going to do it based on my definition, of course. Then I can copy paste. So I select my data type version 2 here. Next, finish. I have to activate it first. Then I can publish it. Tournaments preview. So now you can see it. So now we have our create button and our delete button. I'll show you the list. For example, I can first delete this one. Oh, that works perfectly. Then I can create a new tournament. You see my tournament number, it's read only because I've added that in my behavior. It will be determined by my determination. I'm going to add the upcoming World Cup. And the status is open. I'll create it. And here you can see I've now created a tournament which I can edit or delete. And on the bottom, I can create matches. Now the next thing is custom actions, and my colleague Stijn will explain that to you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, you see here in the tournament list that we have a column with a status, and you have the open or closed. So now we're going to add an extra functionality, an extra button to set the status of the tournament from open to close. So how do we do this? We go to Eclipse, to our behavior, copy paste some code. So we are going to use an action to do this. So in the behavior of the tournament, we add an action close tournament. Of course, we also need to implement this in class, use the quick fix. So it has created the class close tournament for us. I'll keep the code again. So yeah, this uses EML again, so it will modify a tournament. It will use the keys that it gets and set the status to C from closed. And it will read the entity again and send it back to the front end. So if we activate this already, so now we have our behavior and our implementation. Then we also need to add it in the projection, because otherwise it won't be available in our data. Oh, it's already. So, and we're going to use the action close tournament that we just created. So if we now activate it, also going to delete the binding again, because once the preview is broken, can't fix it anymore. So add a new service binding, select the OData V2, next, and push finish. And then we publish, we activate it. Oh, sorry, this one, activate it. And then we can publish it. So now we added our behavior and we added the implementation, but of course, yeah, there is still no button on our screen. So we also need to add the button. And this we can do with some with metadata. So we're gonna add the button here. So we're gonna add an action, and we say it's linked to the closed tournament action. Activate this. I'm gonna preview, but maybe it's possible I need to create a binding again to make the preview work. See, the button is already there. So if we now go, we select tournament, we push the close tournament button, then you see it's going from open to close. So this way you can add custom actions. So we're gonna add one more thing in our demo. So if we go to a tournament and we want to create a match now, and we can select as away team and home team 2 times the same country, same team, which is not possible, of course. You can't play against yourself. So we need some sort of validation to check this. We can do this in our behavior with a validation. So another piece of code. Now we go to the match because we are doing a validation, the creation of a match. So we have a validation, we call it val teams. When does it need to trigger on the save when we do a create? And the fields home team and away team are impacted. Of course, we also need the implementation. So do a quick fix. So create a method for us. Then we will add some more code. So we again use EML to read the match that we want to create, and we check if the home team and away team is the same. If it's the same, then we put the key of the match in the failed list, and we also create a message and we put it in the reported list. This will be used. Copy paste again. I think I forgot something. I think I just forgot the point. So I'm gonna activate it. We don't need to add this to our projection. It should work either way. Let's test it. Go to a tournament, create match, select 2 times same country to provide some more info. Then we push create, then we get an error and a red box between the fields that are wrong, and we get a message here. So that's all we wanted to show in our demo. So yeah, to wrap up, why should we use RAP? First point is it's a long-term strategic solution of SAP, so it's the way forward. It's also very easy for an ABAP developer because it's not really using new technologies. It's using the proven technologies, so you don't need to know JavaScript and other front-end languages to create front-end apps. And also very handy, it can all be done in Eclipse, so in one place. And before we go to the Q&A, I would also like to invite you to two more events. So on November 24th, we have a Sapiens Tech Master class about migrating to the SAP integration suite. And December 13th, we have another Dev2Dev session about SAP process automation. And now we come on our Q&A session. So are there any questions?
Thank you. Let me check in. Okay, so I see the first question is, what is the difference between composition and association?
Yeah, it has to do with in the CDS. So a composition is used to create a hierarchy between the root entity and its child entities, and an association is just a link to another CDS to collect some more data.
Okay, hope that answers the question. Okay, another question. Could you also use a number range to determine the number? I think you are mentioning the tournament number. Well, yes, I think you saw that I used a custom ABAP class to determine that number. So in that ABAP class, of course, I can call a number range and fetch the next number, available number, and put that in my tournament number. So yeah, it's certainly possible. Yes. Yeah, perhaps you can answer the next one.
So the next question is, could you also use ABAP today? If you use the unmanaged scenario, you can add your custom code, of course, and you can also call ABAP. You only need to make sure that ABAP doesn't do a commit, because the commit is triggered by the framework, so you can't do your own commit. So that you need to take into account, and then it's a problem. Any more questions?
Yes. So perhaps the last question, I think the time is already ending, that could you also upload attachments or an Excel in a RAP application? Well, you couldn't previously, but now in the latest version of RAP, there should be, so you know that in SAP Gateway you have your OData stream, but you can now use that apparently in the latest version of RAP. But I personally have not yet worked with that, but it should be available. You can see RAP or SAP is constantly updating the RAP framework and adding new functionalities. And normally adding attachments or uploading Excel files and all attachments is now possible in the latest version. Now, okay, if there are other questions, perhaps we can, well, we will try to answer them via mail, but I think we can close the Q&A today, as we will keep on having questions. So, I want to thank you all for joining the Dev2Dev session, and hopefully we will see you again in another session soon. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.